In today's video, I wanted to go over 3 short side quests featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. To be frank, there are a lot of short quests in this game, and plenty of them belong on this list, but these ones are quests that I've stumbled upon in my travels and haven't gotten around to doing yet. Also, what sets them apart from other quests I've covered is that I don't feel like their lore, background, or history needs much further explanation. They're simple enough and straight to the point. As per usual, the facts and information brought to you in this video are provided by the game itself and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. The first quest is called The Corpse and the Skooma Pipe. This one I find to be quite interesting, as to be honest, without the right initiative, it could sit unfinished for quite some time. It began for me in the town of Balmora. Heading north out of town and aiming for Caldera, I came to a fork in the road. About to take the pathway left, I noticed something peculiar out in the boulder field just ahead. Getting a closer look, it turns out to be the dead body of a male Dunmer. There isn't much around him, and there are no obvious causes for his death. Curious, I peered into his inventory and noticed that he had some items of interest. For starters, his name was Ernil Omeran, and the first unique item was a skooma pipe, apparently belonging to someone named Sia. The second item was a note written from Ernil himself. Taking both into my inventory, I was curious as to what was written on the letter. It reads, "Sia, here's your stuff. Sorry I couldn't stay and chat with you, but it's not always a good idea for me to hang around. You know? Signed Ernil." Interestingly, even by learning this much, the game doesn't give you a journal update notifying you of the quest. So, if you didn't know any better, you'd think this was just an introduction on how to become a skooma addict. This is where, in theory, the otherwise short quest could turn into a long one. Without the proper initiative and curiosity to go looking around, there's no easy way to find Sia. Connecting some of the dots, the person I'm looking for is likely back in the town of Balmora, just based off of the body's proximity to it. Returning and speaking with some of the citizens and guards, no one has any dialogue options pertaining to Ernil, the pipe, the note, or Sia. This is again where I would have personally drawn a blank on what to do next, but persevering and continuing to investigate, I came across a house in town belonging to the aforementioned recipient of the note. The only issue is that Sia's house is secured with a level 50 lock. In order to get inside of it, you need to have the correct lock-picking tools and skills, a scroll, or a spell. I was fortunate enough to have a spell for it, but for the lower level players, the UESP recommends purchasing a scroll of Undussi's Unhinging from Galbadir in the Mages Guild. I got lucky in that no one witnessed me unlocking the door in the middle of town during midday. Sia does have a door upstairs which could be slightly more hidden from public view. Entering inside of the house, there's no one by the immediate entrance. However, ascending up the stairs, I saw a female Khajiit who happens to be Sia. Speaking with her, she asked what I wanted. Inquiring about someone particular, she questions what I meant when I said I was looking for her, as we've never met before. She then asked what I meant when I said I have a note from Ernil. Going forward with the topic, she finds it odd that I have a note from him to her. She said that she's been expecting him any day now, and then receives quite a shock when she finds out that he's dead. She says that he was a good man and always dealt fairly, whatever that means. Sia gets straight to the point though and asks if I found anything else on his body, particularly something for someone else. I was prompted with 2 dialogue options. The first is to tell her yes, and the second is to lie and say that I didn't find anything. The latter results in me keeping the skooma pipe, but being shut out from ever finishing the quest. By choosing the former, Sia tries to cover it up by saying that the pipe was for a friend, but quickly gives up the charade. She thanks me for returning it and remarks that I likely don't care who it belongs to anyways. She rewards me with 50 gold and 10 moon sugar, saying this was originally going to be Ernil's payment. Any further discussion on the matter is as short as Sia saying she's going to miss Ernil, and that it's good to have her skooma pipe back. Ernil's death is left to speculation. I'm unsure if he was affiliated with any of the criminal organizations, but given his note, he knew that there were eyes on him in and around the town of Balmora. Whether those were that of the guards or a rival skooma trade is unknown. At first, I thought Sia killed him, which shouldn't be totally overlooked, but at this point I highly doubt it. Of course, the wilderness is a bad place in Morrowind, and there are creatures near the town of Caldera, not far from his corpse, which could have done this as well. Regardless, that concludes the short but not so straightforward quest, The Corpse and the Skooma Pipe. The next quest for today takes place in the starting village of Seydanin and is called Vonius Nuus. It's actually pretty easy to miss this one if you're like me and don't talk much with the locals. One of the NPCs in this small fishing village is named Vonius Nuus. He hangs around the census and excise office, so he could be one of the first citizens that you lay eyes on. I've spoken to him many times before, asking for his help with solving crimes and getting advice on the area, but he's never spoken about himself. Talking with him, he asks if there's anything he can help me with. I asked for a little advice, and Vonius told me to take a silt strider to the surrounding towns of Vivec or Balmora, as it's fast and cheap. He directs me over to Darvaim Hilarin at the silt strider port. Finally, he says to tell her that Vonius Nuus sent me. It's interesting because this could have very well been one of the first conversations a new player has with an NPC. Ask for some advice and they tell you some pretty useful things, especially with regards to the silt strider. Exiting the conversation and following his instructions, the silt strider port, which can obviously be seen from afar, is right over the bridge and to the right. Approaching the Dunmer, Darvaim, she introduces herself as the caravaner of Seydanin and asks if I'd like to go anywhere. Before giving her my business, I tell her that Vonius sent me. She remarks that he's always sending business her way and that in exchange she does favors for him, whatever those may be. She then calls him a poor fellow, citing that she doesn't think he's very happy in the province. There's no more new information here with Darvaim in regards to Vonius. Taking the initiative to check in on him and seeing what's wrong, I spoke with Vonius again. Asking about himself, he confirms that he's indeed not happy here in Morrowind. He says that if he had the money for it, he'd be sailing off to Narcissus, which interestingly is still in Morrowind, just not on Vardenfell. He says that he came here to make a fortune, but all he has to show for it is a cursed ring. He then makes me a pretty bad offer. He wants me to buy it off of him for 100 gold, the exact amount that it costs to go to Narcissus. He says the ring is worth more than that, but no one wants it because there's a negative side effect. Tapping it increases movement speed, but saps some of the user's HP. He begs for the exchange though, and says it would really help him out. I do it, if only to be nice, and he thanks me, calling me a lifesaver. Ecstatically, he says he's jumping on the next ship out of here, and wishes me better fortune than he had. Looking at the ring, it's not the worst, but not very good either. It damages health for 10 points for 1 second, but fortifies athletics for 5 points for 60 seconds. If I really wanted the extra buff, it wouldn't be so bad, but I'll probably just sell it for some pocket change. Interestingly, after leaving the village and then coming back, Vonius is nowhere to be found. It would seem he really did hop on a boat to Narcissus, which I think is pretty cool. Darvaim has nothing further to say on the matter, as she just repeats the same message. The ring is the reward here, but if you are really keen on it, you could break into his now vacant home within the village. There's nothing of immense value in here though. There are mostly ingredients which could be nice for the budding alchemist. There's a small locked chest which looks enticing, but it only holds silverware. Granted, there's 6 sets of each piece, and the value they can be sold for would really help out lower level players. Beyond that, there isn't much more to this beginner-friendly quest, and thus concludes Vonius Nuus. The third and final short quest for today is To the Fields of Kimu. This quest begins near the town of Pelagiad, heading northwest. Along the road, I came across a split path. One way continues north, and it leads to Fort Moonmoth, Balmora, Saran, etc. The other way actually has no signs or markings for it. I first discovered this quest when taking a wrong turn to Balmora, but it actually acts as what feels like a shortcut. Along the way, I noticed an older Dunmer woman alone on the road. She was pacing back and forth, so I decided to stop and speak with her.
Why do you outlanders think you can bother anyone you please?
Her name was Navrasa Draylor, and she greeted me, asking for my help. She says she's lost and can't find some holy place that she's looking for. Inquiring about the holy place, she calls them the Fields of Kimu. She's on a pilgrimage there, but took a wrong turn at some point. She claims that I know the lands better than her, and offers 150 gold for my time. Agreeing, she thanks me and tells me a bit about them. The fields are apparently by the water with a stunning view. She mentions that there's also a farm nearby where the pilgrims stop for rest. I asked further about the Fields of Kimu, and she tells me a story. Apparently, Lord Vivec came across a poor farmer who had just lost everything. He was unable to harvest something called muck sponge, and therefore couldn't provide for his village or family. This is where Vivec took off his higher class clothing and personally worked the fields. This was until the crops could finally be harvested. It's at the fields of Kimu where pilgrims go to pray to Lord Vivek for extra help. She then marks it on my map, which made me wonder why she didn't do that before. Addressing the map, the fields are north of Pelagiad, which at this point ends up being east-northeast. I thought I had come up with a genius idea. I was going to leap all the way to the fields and force a wait for Navrasa to catch up. I got there pretty quickly and waited around for quite some time. Unfortunately, Navrasa never showed up. This is a strategy that usually works in Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls game I'm most familiar with, but it didn't have any effect here. So I reverted back and took the long way. To be honest, it isn't even that far of a trek on foot either. At the crossroads splitting off to Balmora or Saran, I went down the eastern road until I arrived at the fields. There wasn't anything super obvious to mark the boundaries of them, other than a shrine that was in homage to Vivek. As soon as she crossed past it though, her dialogue window pops up and she thanks me for my help. She gives me the payment and wishes me safe travels. She doesn't offer any new information on the fields or the pilgrimage. I enjoyed her story about Vivek helping out the unfortunate farmer, as I've heard a lot about the Tribunal's charitable aid. However, with where I'm at in the main questline, there's a lot of doubt cast on the legitimacy of the temple's powers, so it's also kind of fun to look at this story and think that it could be one big fib. Either way, there isn't much more to this quest, and in fact, I would deem it as the easiest of the three that I discussed today. There's no monetary or skill requirement needed to complete it. All you have to do is run a brief distance to the east and get paid 150 gold for it. Higher level players likely wouldn't find it that worth it, but it's certainly not a bad sum for those just starting out. With that, thus concludes the quest to the Fields of Kimu, ultimately finishing off this list. Until next time, keep on adventuring.